Have you ever reached a moment where hope felt heavier than despair? A moment where praying felt pointless, where waiting felt cruel, where silence from heaven felt like rejection? Most people don't talk about that moment. They hide it. They call it weakness. They push through and pretend they never doubted. But Padre Pio never ignored that moment. He spoke directly to it. And what he revealed about a soul that gives up on hope is one of the most misunderstood, most sobering, and most compassionate teachings attributed to him. Many people assume that losing hope is the same as losing faith. Padre Pio said that isn't true. Faith can exist even when hope collapses. Faith is believing God exists. Hope is believing God still cares about you personally. And it is hope, not faith, that usually breaks first. Padre Pio met countless people whose faith was intact, but whose hope had been crushed by grief, illness, shame, betrayal, or long unanswered prayers. He didn't scold them, he didn't shame them. He listened, and then he warned them gently, because he said, the moment a soul gives up on hope is the moment it becomes spiritually vulnerable in ways most people never realize. According to Padre Pio, despair is not loud. It doesn't usually announce itself. It doesn't always look like crying or anger. Sometimes it looks calm. Sometimes it looks like acceptance. Sometimes it sounds like, this is just how it is, or I don't expect anything anymore, or I've made peace with the worst. Padre Pio said, this kind of hopelessness is far more dangerous than open rebellion, because it quietly disconnects the soul from expectation. And expectation, he taught, is where grace most often enters. He believed that when a soul gives up hope, it does not immediately fall into darkness. That's important. There is no instant punishment, no dramatic collapse. Instead, something far subtler happens. The soul begins to close itself, not to God's power, but to God's mercy. Padre Pio said God never withdraws his mercy first. The soul does, not deliberately, not maliciously, but through exhaustion, through disappointment, through the belief that nothing will change, so there is no point in asking anymore. Padre Pio described hope as a door that stays cracked open even when everything else feels sealed shut. Prayer flows through that crack. Grace finds entry through that crack. Angels pass through that crack. When hope is abandoned, the door doesn't slam. It slowly closes. And most people don't notice it closing because life continues. They still breathe. They still work. They still smile. But spiritually, something vital has narrowed. He warned that despair creates spiritual isolation, not because God leaves, but because the soul stops reaching outward. It stops looking up. It stops expecting intervention. And when a soul stops expecting anything from God, it becomes easier for lies to settle in. Lies like, you're forgotten, you're being punished, this suffering has no meaning. Padre Pio said, these thoughts don't arrive violently, they arrive gently, logically, even convincingly, and they find fertile ground only in a heart that has stopped hoping. What happens next, according to Padre Pio, is not damnation. It is numbness, a spiritual dulling. The soul still believes in God, but no longer believes God will act. Prayer becomes mechanical, scripture becomes distant, sacraments feel empty. Not because they lack power, but because the soul has stopped waiting for transformation. Padre Pio said this is the most painful state for heaven to witness, because grace is being offered constantly, but it lands on a heart that no longer expects it. He often repeated that God respects human freedom even when that freedom is used to stop hoping. God does not force hope back into a soul. He invites it. He surrounds it. He waits for even the smallest opening. Padre Pio believed that even a sigh, even a complaint, even a frustrated prayer like, I don't understand you anymore, could reopen that door. But total hopelessness, the kind that says, nothing matters now, silences even complaint, and that silence, he warned, is dangerous. Padre Pio spoke about souls who came to him spiritually after death, souls who had not committed great sins, souls who had not rejected God, but who had surrendered to despair near the end of their lives. He said their suffering was not from hatred of God, but from regret. Regret that they stopped hoping too soon. Regret that they assumed God was finished working when he was not. He said despair blinds a soul to the work God is still doing quietly, invisibly, patiently. One of the most striking things Padre Pio said was that hope is not optimism. Optimism expects things to improve. Hope expects God to remain present even if things don't improve. A soul that gives up on hope is not necessarily giving up on a better outcome. It is giving up on presence, on relationship, on the belief that suffering is being seen and held. Padre Pio said, "That is why despair wounds the heart of God so deeply, not because he is offended, but because the soul believes it is alone when it is not." He taught that demons fear hope more than they fear prayer, because prayer can be recited without expectation. Hope cannot. Hope assumes response. Hope assumes attention. Hope assumes love. When a soul abandons hope, it becomes easier for fear to masquerade as realism. Padre Pio said, "Many people confuse hopelessness with maturity, saying things like, 'I've grown past expecting miracles.'" He warned that this mindset slowly drains spiritual life without ever looking sinful. But Padre Pio never left people there. He never ended with fear. He always pointed back to mercy. He insisted that no soul is ever beyond hope while it still breathes. He said even the desire to want hope again is already hope returning. Even listening to words about hope, even feeling discomfort when despair is mentioned, is a sign that the soul is still responsive. He told people who felt hopeless not to force joy, not to fake faith, not to pretend strength. He told them to do one thing only: ask for the grace to hope again. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Even if the request felt empty, even if it felt mechanical, even if it felt foolish. He believed that this single request pierced heaven more powerfully than long prayers, said without expectation. Padre Pio also warned against judging others who appear hopeless. He said, "Despair often comes from prolonged suffering, not from moral failure. Illness, grief, loneliness, repeated loss. Unanswered prayers can grind hope down slowly until the soul simply collapses inward." He believed that when we encounter someone like this, our role is not to correct them, but to carry hope for them until they can carry it again themselves. If this message resonates with you, if you've ever felt your hope thinning, or if you know someone who is quietly giving up inside, write in the comments, "Lord, restore hope where it is fading, not for attention, not for performance, but as an act of alignment." You never know who will read it at the exact moment they need to know they are not alone. Padre Pio believed that hope is the last thing the soul releases before complete surrender, and he believed that God watches that moment more closely than any other, not to condemn, but to intervene. He said, "Heaven leans closest when a soul is most tempted to stop believing its suffering has meaning." He reminded people again and again that hope does not mean everything will make sense. It means trusting that sense is not required for love to remain active. It means believing that silence is not absence. It means choosing to wait, even when waiting hurts. In the end, Padre Pio said the soul that gives up on hope does not fall away from God. It simply stops turning toward Him. And God, who never forces love, waits patiently for the smallest movement back. A whisper, a tear, a thought like, "What if I'm wrong?" He said that single thought can reopen the door that despair tried to close. If you are still listening to this, if these words stirred something uncomfortable or tender in you, that is not coincidence. That is awareness returning. That is hope knocking softly. And according to Padre Pio, even answering that knock with trembling hands is enough to begin again. Even after understanding the danger of giving up on hope, Padre Pio didn't leave people with fear alone. He explained that hope, even when it feels impossible, can be nurtured back into life. He often said that the soul doesn't have to perform miracles of courage. It only has to make small, intentional gestures toward God. A short prayer, a single act of kindness, a quiet acknowledgement that God is still present. These are not grandiose. They are seeds. Seeds that slowly grow into the ability to hope again. Padre Pio compared this to a dimly lit candle in a vast darkness. Even a flicker of light keeps the shadows from swallowing the room completely. He taught that hope is strengthened by community. No soul exists in isolation from others. When someone loses hope, Padre Pio encouraged them to let others carry it for them. Listening to another's faith, witnessing acts of charity, or even reading a story of perseverance could rekindle hope within a seemingly hopeless heart. He often reminded his followers that heaven works through people as much as through prayer. Sometimes, the loving presence of another human being is the channel through which God gently restores hope. Padre Pio also emphasized patience. Despair often comes from the expectation that God must act immediately. When he doesn't, the soul collapses inward. But Padre Pio insisted that God's timing is rarely aligned with human urgency. In his eyes, every prolonged trial contains hidden graces, lessons, growth, protection that are invisible until viewed in retrospect. He cautioned that abandoning hope too early blinds the soul to these hidden gifts. In essence, despair can deprive the soul of blessings it might have already received or will receive quietly, like rain nourishing unseen roots beneath the soil. He warned that losing hope could make the soul susceptible not only to spiritual darkness, but also to inner despair that manifests in the body and mind. Depression, anxiety, and a sense of futility are not just emotional responses, they are signals that the soul is overburdened. Padre Pio understood this and treated both the spiritual and the emotional suffering of those who came to him. He taught that seeking medical or psychological help is not a betrayal of faith. Instead, it is a form of hope, trusting that God provides healing through all available means. One of the most compelling aspects of Padre Pio's teachings was his insistence that hope can always be restored, no matter how broken a soul feels. Even in his later years, when he was worn with suffering and exhaustion, he spoke about hope as a living, breathing presence that waits patiently, like a loyal friend, at the threshold of the heart. All a soul needs to do is turn slightly toward it, even with trembling hands or uncertain thoughts. Padre Pio often told stories of souls who had wandered into despair, but found hope again through the smallest acts. A simple prayer whispered in secret, an innocent child's smile, the quiet beauty of creation, or even a stray act of kindness from a stranger. These moments, he explained, are not coincidences. They are God's invitations, subtle yet persistent, to remember that his love never abandons and his mercy never sleeps. He also warned against the false comfort of cynicism. Many people convince themselves that hope is futile because life is unfair. Padre Pio acknowledged that life is indeed filled with suffering, but he insisted that abandoning hope is a spiritual danger far greater than any earthly hardship. Cynicism may feel protective, but it cuts off the soul from the very grace that could transform suffering into growth. He reminded people that even in moments of despair, God's plan continues, though often unseen, and hope is the lens through which the soul can perceive it. If you've ever felt the crushing weight of hopelessness, Padre Pio's words offer both a warning and a lifeline. He invites you to recognize the small cracks in your despair and to let even a faint glimmer of hope pass through. That flicker, he said, can grow into a steady light that illuminates paths you cannot yet see. If this message resonates, write in the comments, "Restore hope in me, Lord," not just for yourself, but for anyone reading it who may need that encouragement today. Padre Pio's vision was both sobering and compassionate. He showed that a soul that abandons hope is in peril, but also that no soul is beyond the reach of God's mercy. Every sigh, every tear, every small gesture toward the divine, even if it feels meaningless, is noticed, held, and cherished. He reminded the world that the presence of hope, however faint, keeps the soul open to God's continuous work. And perhaps the most humbling part of his teaching is that hope is not earned. It is offered freely, persistently, even to those who have turned away from it. Padre Pio insisted that the soul only needs to reach, even a little, to receive it. It does not have to be confident or articulate. It does not have to be perfect. It only has to exist. So, the next time you feel the weight of despair pressing down on you, remember Padre Pio's wisdom. The moment hope seems lost is precisely when God is nearest. Listen for his quiet presence in prayer, in the kindness of others, in the beauty around you, and in the small, seemingly insignificant acts that life offers daily. These are the channels through which hope is restored. If you are feeling hopeless right now, or if someone you know is silently struggling, write in the comments, "Bring hope back into our hearts." These words are more than messages, they are invitations to notice hope, to nurture it, and to remind one another that the soul is never abandoned, even when it feels alone. Padre Pio's teachings about hope are not just spiritual lessons, they are calls to live differently. They challenge us to see despair not as a final verdict, but as a signal to reach out, to pray, to act, and to allow God's quiet grace to enter. Even the faintest glimmer of hope can prevent a soul from closing completely, and in that small opening, everything can change. He asked the faithful to be vigilant, to notice when hope is slipping, not to judge, not to despair, but to act, to pray for those who cannot pray for themselves, to speak encouragement where silence has taken root, and in doing so, Padre Pio taught, the community becomes an instrument of God's mercy, carrying hope to those who have abandoned it. Hope, according to Padre Pio, is not passive, it is active. It is a choice. Even in suffering, even in loss, even when the world seems indifferent, choosing to hope, choosing to trust that God is present, is itself an act of spiritual resistance. It preserves the soul. It keeps the heart open. It maintains the invisible connection between heaven and earth. And he reminded us that time is not an enemy. A soul may falter today, tomorrow, or for years, but grace continues to flow. Hope continues to wait. Padre Pio's message is radical in its simplicity. Even the faintest willingness to hope is enough to invite divine intervention. Even the smallest step toward trust can begin the restoration of a soul teetering on despair. If this reflection on hope touches you, consider writing in the comments, "Let hope return to all who have given up." Your words may reach someone who desperately needs them in this very moment. In that way, we all participate in the quiet work of nurturing hope, just as Padre Pio encouraged through prayer, intention, and compassionate action. Padre Pio showed that the soul that gives up on hope is never abandoned, but it is at a crossroads. One small movement toward God, one sincere prayer, one act of trust, and the door of despair begins to reopen. It is never too late, he insisted, to let hope return. Even in the deepest darkness, even in the loneliest hour, hope can be restored, and the soul can begin to breathe again. This is the teaching of Padre Pio, that hope is a living gift, fragile yet resilient, offered freely and waiting for the soul to reach for it. Even if you feel unworthy, even if you feel too broken, even if the world has seemed indifferent, hope is still there, always there, and it only asks for the smallest gesture to be welcomed back. If you believe in hope, write in the comments, "Hope is alive in me." Let these words be a light to others. Let them remind yourself, and anyone reading, that giving up on hope is not the end. Padre Pio's message is clear. Despair may press hard, but hope, once invited, is stronger than anything that seeks to take it away. Even now, as you read this, the smallest flicker of hope can emerge from your heart. Padre Pio believed that God's mercy is relentless, patience is eternal, and love never abandons a soul that even whispers the desire to hope again. Your small gestures, prayers, and words can be enough to restore hope in yourself and in others, keeping the soul open to the divine work that never ceases, no matter how silent it may seem. Padre Pio's wisdom is a reminder: do not underestimate the power of hope. Do not let despair define your story. Reach out, pray, act, and trust. The soul that nearly surrendered can rise again, because God waits patiently for even the tiniest spark, for even the quietest prayer, and for even the faintest willingness to believe that hope is never truly lost. If you feel inspired, write in the comments, "Restore hope, Lord," not only for yourself, but for everyone in need. Your words may be the first light that pierces the darkness for someone today. Padre Pio's teachings continue to live through these acts, through our willingness to notice despair, to offer encouragement, and to nurture hope where it has almost vanished. The soul that gives up on hope is vulnerable, yes, but it is never beyond restoration. Even one whispered prayer, even one act of trust, even one thought that says, "Maybe God is still here," is enough to reopen the heart and invite grace. Padre Pio's message is simple yet profound. Hope is never too far gone. It waits, it watches, it invites, and when we respond, no matter how small, the soul begins to heal. In the end, Padre Pio's message about hope is both gentle and urgent. He reminds us that despair is not the absence of God, but the absence of our expectation of His presence. A soul that gives up on hope is not condemned, it is simply at a crossroads, waiting for even the smallest gesture of trust, prayer, or intention to turn back toward God. Every sigh, every tear, every whispered thought of longing is noticed. Every flicker of willingness to hope again is enough for grace to enter. He taught that hope is a living gift, fragile yet resilient, always offered freely, always waiting patiently. Even when life seems unbearable, even when prayers seem unanswered, even when silence feels deafening, hope remains. It asks only that the soul reach out, even timidly, even imperfectly. And when we do, even in the smallest way, the door of despair begins to reopen, allowing light, mercy, and love to flow once more. Padre Pio's wisdom calls us not only to protect our own hope, but to nurture it in others. A kind word, a prayer, a small act of compassion can restore what was almost lost. Hope, he reminds us, is contagious. It can travel through hearts and lives in ways we may never fully see. So, if you or someone you know is struggling, remember his teaching. It is never too late. Never too late to whisper a prayer, to reach for God, to invite hope back into the heart. Even the faintest spark is enough to illuminate the darkness, to reconnect the soul to the divine, and to remind us that no matter how heavy despair feels, hope endures. If this message touches you, write in the comments, "Restore hope, Lord," as a promise to yourself and to others that hope is alive, hope is powerful, and hope can always return. Through these small acts, we keep the soul open, the heart receptive, and the spirit aligned with the enduring mercy and love of God that Padre Pio so faithfully revealed. In the quiet moments, in the struggles unseen by others, let hope be your companion, your anchor, and your guide, because even when it feels lost, it has never truly left you.